And the Kenya National Union of Teachers today had a meeting with stakeholders in the education sector to discuss the state of education in Kenyan schools. Well, let's listen to some of the things that they had to say in that meeting.
Should be a turning point of delivery of quality education for free to every child in Kenya, because we have the right constitutional framework, the right legislation framework. When everybody speaks, we have the legal framework in place, which of course many nations do not have, but we are very, very poor in implementing and enforcing the same. We have been seated for 3 days as civil societies and unions in the education sector to analyze in details the privatization in this country as part of the global response. It is not only in Kenya that we are doing this, we are doing it everywhere, all over the world.
It's part of what Wilson Sosion had to say this morning, and we want to speak to our Sharon Momanyi, who covered that function extensively this morning. And Sharon, you know, Sosion of course questioned government's commitment towards giving Kenyan children quality education, so that good education is not just a preserve of the rich. What else were the key highlights in this meeting?
Yes, Betty, as you rightly say, they were basically calling or raising an alarm on what they say is an increased commercialization of school and education. It was a meeting by joint stakeholders in the education sector, including unions of teachers and other NGOs, including Action Aid Kenya and Education International, all raising alarms over what they say is an increased commercialization of education in Kenya. And what they mean by this is that there is a rise of institutions that are basically peddling, in their words, education as a commodity, and saying that this should not be allowed to take place, education being a right to all children, not just in Kenya but globally, under the Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted last year as the development goal number 4, saying that quality education is indeed a right to all children. And they specifically poked holes into the policy that was adopted in 2009 here in Kenya. That is the policy for alternative provision of basic education and training, APET, that was adopted in 2009. And what this policy is, Betty, is one that allows for the setting up and the regulation of non-formal education institutions. And these are institutions that are not formal, as suggested by their reference, and that they are not, constitutional really. But this policy was formed so as to allow children who cannot access public education or private education, whether due to, the unavailability of these schools in their area or the costs involved in the same. So just to provide alternative education to the schools. And there is the 2009 policy was put in place to regulate this, thus showing what are the basic standards and regulations that are needed to be adopted for this non-formal institutions. And what the stakeholders are saying today, Betty, is that this policy has seen some institutions abusing this policy, institutions that they say call themselves non-formal institutions, but are in fact private institutions, are getting money out of students. And this, they say, needs to be farmed up, regulations on the same to be farmed up. And they have given an example, really raising alarm on this school that has become quite popular in Kenya, Betty, the Bridges International Schools, which they say is really one of those that they have their eyes on as an institution they say is really not true to what it presents itself to be. This is according to them, saying that it is in fact a private institution that has been funded by the World Bank, they say, but still is peddling itself as an institution that seeks to provide non-formal education to children who do not have enough money to otherwise go to the public schools and the private schools. So just poking holes into the education system, particularly regarding the standards and the regulations, saying that many schools are sprouting and the government needs to really tighten the ropes on the regulation of these institutions. Betty.
Sharon, maybe finally, they also touched on something to do with, of course, remuneration, which KNUT has been very vocal about for so many years. What exactly did they have to say in relation to the remuneration and the quality of education in our schools?
Betty, quality, they said what they really emphasized on was the matter of quality, saying they actually, as education stakeholders, they may need to sit down with the government and review this particular policy on the alternative basic education and training, saying that it does provide access to many children who otherwise could not access these public schools and the ones that are regulated under the Ministry of Education, but saying that there needs to be a tighter regulation of these other schools. Also saying that these non-formal schools are known to not have curriculum that is standard to the public the curriculum used in the 844 system. They seem to have a rather different kind of curriculum. But what the stakeholders are now saying is that there is a need to also ensure that the teachers who are teaching in these non-formal institutions are trained teachers, and so as a way of ensuring education that is given to the children going to the schools is standard and of high quality. So the need, saying that there are many trained teachers who in fact are not employed, so there would be no reason to use teachers that are not trained in any institution at all that is an education institution. So really being very vocal there on matters standard and the quality of the education being given to children in these non-formal institutions. Betty.
Right. Thank you very much, Sharon Momanyi, there reporting live from our City Center studio.